Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Unlocking Venture Capital. I'm Sydney Wong, your host, and I'm so excited to get to share with you the greatest tips that the best VCs have to offer you in 2025. So today we have tips from Shaun Gold, Marlon Ramirez, and Jeff Becker. As we head into 2025, the lessons that these awesome VCs will share with you today are more relevant than ever, especially if you're looking to make an impact in your startup journey and walk away with not just theoretical knowledge, but also actionable advice from the real world. And it can help shape your path into the coming year. Happy 2025.
So essentially, for those looking to get into venture capital or any industry right now, especially startups, technology, whatever that may be, the network is the most important part. Everyone gets it wrong. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's wrong. It's who knows you.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to come to mind of someone when they're busy doing something that they either don't want to do or that they're not the right fit for, but they remember you and they want to just say, I know the person for this, and they make it a warm introduction, a connection. I come from spending almost 2 decades in Miami nightlife, so my entire I don't have a career, but let's say hypothetically, let's call it that. Um, the career was all about connecting. I never spent any money on ads. I never paid anyone to promote anything. It was always people had my number. I serviced my clients. They gave my number out, and it was just kind of everything was inbound. There was no cold outreach. There was none of that. And the same thing kind of applies to venture. I mean, you're going to have a lot easier of a time, whether it's raising capital, whether it's trying to get work in venture, whether it's just getting someone to answer an email. If you actually know the person or you
Yeah.
get introduced by a trusted individual to that person, so it's more informal. And I think that's really what people should focus on.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's the hardest thing because people, especially if you're a founder, if you're looking for a job, you're essentially just going to be trying to collect cards and annoy people, and that's not the way to go. It
Yeah.
definitely
No,
isn't.
absolutely. Because it's not about like the breadth. It really is about how you're categorizing them in your mind and how your value, the value prop map is in theirs to you. And so understanding that it's a whole other thing in itself. And it's something you never learned from school. Was there a
No.
particular moment when it struck you when you're like, oh, I'm really good at this and like, I
For
got to level
venture
up on this skill?
or for nightlife, which one? Because
Oh,
nightlife,
just
yes.
being a connector because it
Oh,
is
connector,
so yeah,
yeah.
it is the skill set
Um,
that you were able to translate into both industries.
yeah. I mean, it was so nightlife by like day two, it hit me when I was doing my very first parties in the
Oh,
Bahamas for spring break. I mean, this was like I
I
was
remember we talked about that.
yeah, incredibly good at it. And I just said, I'm going to take a chance on myself and do that. As usual, everyone thought I was crazy. But, they were wrong and I was right. No surprise there. But yeah, as I expanded from just like nightclubs and lounges and whatnot, it did hit me that the people that I had in my network, whether they were celebrities or whether they were high net worth individuals, whether they were startup founders or VCs or wealth managers, whatever the case may be, it is a small world, right? And there's a way to break out of that and use that to your advantage for whatever it is you want to do.
Hmm.
So the nightlife aspect also prepared me for being a connector just because it's second nature. I mean, people get like very weird if they don't know how to do it. And it's not hard. They're like, oh, I have to come up with a way to introduce you in a way that will make you look good, but will also make me look good. And I was like, or you can just say, hey, meet my friend. He's doing something in this space and you should have a chat with him. It's very simple. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so second nature to me because I've been doing it my whole life and just the way my mind works of when I meet someone, I know what they do and I like them. Because that's a big thing too. You have to actually like them.
Yeah.
And I meet
Hopefully.
yeah, exactly. And I meet someone else that I like, it's not an issue. I mean, I do it every day. I just make introductions all the time. I don't expect anything out of it. If something cool happens, then something cool happens. But again, there's a lot of people that try to make a business out of it, where it's like, my network has value, which is why you're going to pay me X amount. And I was like, great, it's awesome. Let me just pay you to introduce me to strangers that probably don't want to meet with me because they know what you're doing.
And so we are seeing, a big trend of not just emerging funds that grew out of 2021, but also that more and more funds have to have these kinds of specializations, these
Yeah,
industry expertise, these,
yeah,
deep industry knowledge that you have because you ran an airline and multiple other businesses. So, but one of the things that we also don't see, which I have found in your fund, which was very special, was the intergeographies. Okay, so actually crossing borders and going into other countries because it's so high risk and it's so very very foreign to other people per se. So that is a big thing that you have taken on upon yourself in the way that you are going to be doing due diligence that way. So walk us a little bit across, how you do due diligence because you focus on Latin America and US, right? And
yeah.
that is enormous cultural differences, economic differences, every kind of difference you can possibly think of. So your due diligence process must be so different and vigorous compared to other people who are like, I have worked somewhere, I'm not going to say who where, at a fund where the boss is like, we're going to invest in places we can drive to. Okay. This is what we're going to do. So you taking this huge, risk on your shoulders and this weight is something that is, of course, going to have huge impact for everyone.
Yes, yes. And so I want to answer that twofold, right? First, yes, we invest in Latin America, but the majority of investments are US. So as a way that, so I would say more than 70% of our 80 or 78% of the investments will be US. Uh, the Latin America portion, I leverage my experience in the region. So I would not be investing in Brazil and Mexico if I hadn't operated there. So having been in the trenches in Latin America gives me gives me a competitive advantage to be able to do due diligence and kind of get into opportunities, but at the same time mitigate some of that risk.
Mm-hmm.
And how that risk is mitigated in Latin America, especially, but in the US as well, is really driven by a collaborative approach, like having other VCs on the cap table.
Yeah.
Uh, I do like to meet the founders personally, get reference checks. So getting, I don't, especially in that time, I don't like to be like a solo investor. Usually opportunities come to me through the network as well, which also kind of filters out some of the noise. And so from a due diligence perspective, we do apply this due diligence kind of across the board, US and LATAM. We have our checklist. We want to go through and make sure that everything's legitimate. What the founders told us is real. Uh, I don't know if because we're probably one of the few VCs that you've interviewed that have invested in LATAM. What we find in LATAM, we actually have founders that because it's a developing region, they have more patience for due diligence.
Really? Okay, let's walk through an example. I'm
Yeah, because investors in LATAM, I would dare say probably investors in other emerging economies like India and Africa, people know that there's a lot of pitfalls, that there's a lot of issues other than the startup that need to be looked at, government, contracts. So founders know that, right? And so some of the companies that we've come across, they understand that they have robust data rooms with information in place. They have more patience to sit down and go through the diligence, and as a U.S. fund investing in Latin America, even though currently, we're still not at the ideal check size, our check size is still pretty relevant. And
your
once you
your
convert
check
it to
size is
local,
whatever the market will accept. So if founders
exactly,
accept it, that's the market.
exactly, and and so when you convert it to local currency, it becomes more relevant also than
Yeah.
for U.S. companies. So those two factors allow for us to get a little bit more time with LATAM founders. Obviously, when you have a breakout founder, it's like second time founder, and then they're able to create that momentum with US VCs, then it becomes kind of like a US founder operating in Latin America, and they'll
give you the corresponding diligence time like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I would say that's the minority. That's the minority of deals that you would see in Latin America.
I led sales teams at LinkedIn for 9 years. So I was always a B2B sales guy. And coming into venture, I naturally just that was what it was and the approach I took. And so, you know, classic like Sandler pain funnel discovery, sort of like customer value type of approach. But as I've been in venture capital for a few years now and I've seen different types of businesses and different types of founders, I
Hmm.
think you first have to figure out what kind of company am I? Like, product led, tops down, consumer. Like, what am I? Who am I? What do I want to be? And then the second is what kind of founder am I? What are my
Yeah.
strengths? Where are my distribution advantages? Where are my strengths? And trying to play to the overlap of those two things. When we had the founder Superhuman, Vivek, Rahul's co-founder, and talked a lot about product market fit and product led growth and how to measure it and the engine that they built for that strategy. I thought that was fascinating. And I've probably told that story 100 times. I wrote about it in my book, Inevitable, as well. And yet, still, so few people pick up that exact strategy and operate it the way they did, even though the playbook is completely filled out. And so
Mm.
it's really interesting that here there is a step by step approach, and very few people actually use it. And
Yeah.
then you have, my B2B founders, and I can teach B2B sales all day long. And people really do gravitate towards that stuff, but there's a very small percentage that actually uh, take it the distance. I have a company like Valley, for example, joinvalley.co. Um, they're outstanding. And when I do a sales session with them, it's like everything is not only internalized, but then he builds content and product out of it. And it'll be 10 times better than I ever articulated it. And so if you follow Zaid, the founder there on
That's
LinkedIn,
funny.
and you read his posts, like, he is very dialed in on B2B sales. It's a very
Yeah.
different approach. Um, whereas I've had founders that have to pivot through, do I do an SMB product led strategy or a tops down enterprise strategy? And so I think like these playbooks are pretty well defined, but I think what founders fail to do is actually reflect on what are they best in the world at? What is their
Right.
team best in the world at? Where are their distribution advantages? And what does the product require? If you're building a product led growth business, you better be really, really good at product led growth. You better be very good at product market fit. You better have a scientific approach to hypothesis testing and to product market fit measurement. And I would say 99% of people that are attempting that really don't. So again, it's interesting to hear the different answers to those speakers. But what I've
Hmm.
noticed is that it comes down to some of those dimensions rather than there being a one size fits all.